Silvia Cattaneo, and I work as IHL and Policy Advisor at the GICHD. Compared to other sectors in disarmament, mine action is peculiar because it is highly regulated. When we talk about supporting conventions at the GICHD, we actually refer to four main instruments. The Landmine Convention, so the Ottawa Treaty that bans anti-personnel landmines, the Oslo Convention that bans cluster munitions, and two instruments that are part of the Convention on certain conventional weapons, so in particular amended Protocol 2, on mines, booby traps and other devices, and then Protocol 5 on explosive remnants of war. Of these, usually the Landmine Treaty and the Cluster Munition Convention draw more attention because these are definite success stories in the sector. These are treaties that not only set a complete ban on all activities relating to entire classes of weapons, so respectively anti-personnel mines and cluster munitions, also a ban on all the related activities of transfer, stockpile, and of course use. Both conventions set clear and time-bound obligations on stockpile destruction and clearance, and they also contain clear obligations concerning international cooperation assistance, risk education, and victim assistance. The GICHD was created in 1998 precisely to favor and facilitate implementation of the Ottawa Convention banning landmines. So we can say that supporting IHL conventions is part of the very DNA of the Centre. Over time, as new conventions have been adopted and the scope of mine action has broadened, the work of the GICHD has also broadened accordingly. So when it comes to these conventions, the GICHD supports them in two main ways, and concerning all the scope of explosive ordnance and including ammunition. So we provide, for a start, logistical support by hosting the ISUs of both the Mine Ban Treaty and the Convention on Cluster Munitions. These ISUs are responsible towards the states parties. We also manage the sponsorship programs of both these conventions and also the CCW. This is very important because sponsorship programs actually facilitate participation by countries that wouldn't be able to support their own delegates to come to the international meetings of the conventions. But we also provide a substantive support to all of these, which takes the form essentially of targeted expert support, provision of advice, provision of recommendations. This can happen on request. For instance, we've in the past supported several presidencies of either the Mine Ban Treaty or the CCM at their own request, elaborating some particular issues that were addressed in the meetings. And the other typical way in which we provide our input is through comments to extension requests that states present in case they cannot fulfill their clearance obligations within the set deadlines. And the main goal that we have in this regard is to connect the multilateral field with what's going on the ground. It's very important because these conventions all have mechanisms of intersessional work that allow countries to meet periodically, once or twice a year, to review progress of implementation. It's important that all these are underpinned by information on what actually happens on the ground. Otherwise, there will be a complete separation between the policy level and the field level, and the GICHD is one bridge between these two. Review conferences are quite common in the multilateral sector. They're a typical component of conventions because they pursue two main goals. The first is to review progress over the previous review cycle. And the second very important goal is to set guidelines for the next review cycle. The review conferences are particularly strong when it comes to the Mine Ban Treaty and the Convention on Cluster Munitions. And last year, the second review conference of the Convention on Cluster Munitions was able to adopt both a review document that assessed essentially where the sector was and where progress was after 5 years since the first review conference, but also agreed the Lausanne Action Plan, which is an action-oriented, essentially, list of commitments that states parties to the CCM have taken and that are very concrete. And so this is the main way that the conference will influence the sector. The Lausanne Action Plan was particularly important not only because following actually the example that was set with the Oslo Action Plan on the Landmine Treaty, because it created this monitoring framework. This is something that was missing before, and this is something that the GICHD also agreed would be fundamental in guiding action and decisions in the next review cycle. But from the also purely thematic point of view, the Lausanne Action Plan is a pretty good victory because, for starters, what was before treated as a single section of clearance and risk education is now split up. And I think this is really a testament to how the community is realizing that risk education is extremely, it's critical really if you want to prevent victims. And so I think that the fact that now we have a full section on it is a good recognition that risk education probably needs to be invested on more in the future. There were also a lot of efforts in fully mainstreaming gender and diversity throughout the entire plan. It was not easy, but there is a significant progress in this respect in the plan itself. And indeed, the conference itself showed a great commitment towards gender and diversity mainstreaming, because one of the decisions of the conference was to nominate Gender Focal Point as part of the coordinating committee. And the Gender Focal Point will be precisely tasked with making sure that all the work of the committee includes gender and diversity. And then there was the Gender Working Group, which is an informal working group of a variety of civil society organizations, and GICHD is part of this, helped draft a working paper on gender and diversity. The paper was presented by the Netherlands, and it was sponsored by 24 states parties to the CCM. And this also is a really good result because it really brings to the attention how gender and diversity considerations are critical to make sure the mine action is effective and that the beneficiaries are all the people that should be included. Upon the request of the Swiss presidency of the conference, the GICHD helped draft the two sections of the Lausanne Action Plan on survey and clearance and risk education. And the GICHD also provided a lot of expert input in making sure that the gender and diversity elements would be mainstreamed throughout the whole Lausanne Action Plan. And secondly, as an active member of Gender Working Group, the GICHD significantly contributed to the working paper on mainstreaming gender and diversity in the convention and making sure that this would be in synergy with other existing instruments.